You stay late when your boss asks. You say yes to every project, even when you run off your feet. You avoid conflict, nod along, and keep your head down. And somehow, the promotion went to someone who doesn't work as hard as you. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 3 strategies to stop being a pushover and start being seen as leadership material. So you can finally get the recognition and advancements that you've been working for without turning into somebody that you don't recognize. Here's what most people think. I just need to work harder. I need to prove my value more, and eventually they'll notice. But the problem with this is that you're optimizing for likability instead of respect. And that's exactly where I was partway through my career. If something needed fixing late, I'd do it. If a project needed extra input, I'd say yes. And if someone senior asked for help at short notice, I'd make it work. And I genuinely believe that that was how you prove leadership potential. Be dependable, be agreeable, don't rock the boat. But over time, something started to bother me because I noticed that when conversations turned strategic, or there were conversations around promotions or bigger clients, future leadership roles, my name wasn't coming up. But there were other people who didn't work longer hours than me and very often worked fewer hours. They were being pulled into those more senior conversations. And the shift for me came when I stopped automatically just absorbing all of this work. So instead of just staying late in the office, and instead of just nodding along in meetings, I started offering an alternative. And nothing dramatic happened. There was no backlash, there was no confrontation, but gradually the way people engaged with me changed. I was pulled into conversations earlier. I was asked for my view, not just my help. And that's really when my progression accelerated. So here are the 3 strategies that you can use to stop being a pushover and start being seen as promotable. And these are the exact strategies that I've worked with many people on, and I've seen them work across every industry: tech, finance, consulting, healthcare, you name it. The first strategy is to challenge ideas, not somebody's ego. So the fastest way to keep yourself invisible is to agree with everything your boss says. You sit in meetings, you nod along, and you don't rock the boat. And your boss thinks they're competent, but they're not strategic. But here's the thing, disagreement doesn't have to be confrontational. The best leaders I've worked with don't say, that won't work, or I disagree with that approach. They say, look, I see where you're coming from. Here's another angle that I've been thinking about. Well, that makes sense, but one concern I have is this. What do you think about approaching it in this way instead? And if you notice what's happening here, you're challenging the other person's idea, not them personally. You're starting with respect and you're ending with impact. It shows you're thinking critically, because leaders don't just execute, they evaluate, they consider the trade-offs, they offer alternatives. So here's exactly how to do it. First, let your boss finish their thought. Don't interrupt them. Second, acknowledge what makes sense about their approach. Find some overlap. I agree we need to move that project along faster, or that particular goal makes sense. And then thirdly, introduce your alternative with, here's what I'm considering, or another way to look at this might be. And if you're not sure, you can frame it as a question. That softens it a bit. So what do you think about trying this approach first? The mistake that most people make is they either say nothing at all, so they stay completely invisible, or they challenge in a way that feels like it's a bit of an attack on the other person. Both of those approaches will keep you stuck. So let me give you an example. So I worked with a client, Sunita. She was a marketing account manager at a SaaS company, and she used to stay silent in strategy meetings because she didn't want to seem difficult or like she was challenging her chief marketing officer's authority. But then she kept watching less experienced people get promoted because they were contributing to those more strategic conversations. So we worked on this exact strategy for her. So the next time her CMO proposed a campaign direction that Sunita had some doubts about, instead of staying quiet, she said, look, I love the concept. One concern I've got is whether our audience is going to respond to that messaging based on what we've seen work in the past. So what if we tested both of the approaches, perhaps with a small budget first, and let the data decide? And in this instance, her CMO paused and said, that's great, that's smart, let's do that. 3 months later, Sunita's CMO told her that she was being considered for director because she thinks like a strategist, not just an executor. Same person, same intelligence, slightly different behavior, but that's what this strategy does. It shifts how people see you. Now, challenging ideas is powerful, but here's the problem. If you're underwater with your own work, you're not going to have the bandwidth to think strategically or contribute meaningfully. So that's why strategy 2 is critical. So strategy 2 is all about protecting your time like a leader. So here's what nobody tells you about getting promoted. Working late doesn't make you look dedicated. It makes you look like you can't manage priorities. Leaders don't stay late in the office because their boss asked them to take on just one more thing. They protect their time. and they do it without seeming difficult or uncommitted. Now look, let me be clear, I'm not saying don't work hard. I'm saying stop measuring your performance by the number of hours that you're working. Because here's what's really happening when you say yes to everything and stay late constantly. You become the person that they go to when something needs to be done quickly, not the person they promote. And the worst part is that you'll be so underwater with your own work that you don't have the bandwidth to think strategically or contribute meaningfully in those meetings that we talked about. You're not going to be able to challenge those ideas because you'll be stuck in a cycle that guarantees you stay exactly where you are. If you need a simple framework to push back on work, you can say something like, right now I'm working on X, Y, and Z. If I take this particular piece of work on, I think I should deprioritize Z. Do you agree? That's the framework, really simple. And it works because it does three things simultaneously. First, it shows that you're thinking about priorities, not just task completion. You're not saying no, you're not complaining about workload, you're demonstrating strategic thinking. Second, it forces your boss to also think about what actually matters most, what these priorities are. Most of the time, they just haven't thought it through either. They're just reacting to what's urgent as well. So when you give your view on what to prioritize, you're making them think like a leader too. And thirdly, it protects your time without seeming difficult. You're not refusing, you're collaborating on what should take priority. Be really specific about those other projects that you're working on. Don't just say, I'm really busy, because everybody's really busy. One more critical thing. You have to stop volunteering for everything. I know it feels like being a team player, but leaders are selective about where they add their value. And if you're the person who always raises their hand for every project, every committee, every initiative, you're signaling that you don't have a strategic filter. Leaders say yes to the right things, not all the things. So when someone asks for volunteers, before you raise your hand, ask yourself, does this align with my priorities? Will this help me demonstrate my leadership? Or am I just trying to seem helpful? If it's the latter, maybe put your hand down. That's how you protect your time while still being seen as a team player. So you're challenging ideas and protecting your time, but here's how you make both of those strategies bulletproof. Strategy 3 is all about using data as your shield. So here's the problem with challenging your boss based on an opinion. It becomes your opinion versus theirs. And guess whose opinion is likely to win? But when you challenge based on data, it's not personal anymore, it's just facts. Opinions can be argued with, but it's really hard to argue with data. So when you need to push back on a decision, or you want to change in direction on a particular project, or you're challenging an approach, lead with evidence. So don't say something like, I don't think that's the right approach. Use your data, so you can say something like, based on the latest data from a particular source, this approach might lead to this much better outcome. What do you think? So notice the difference. You're not disagreeing. You're both looking at the same information, this data, and discussing what it means. And this works because it removes ego from the equation. You're not challenging your boss. You're both just evaluating this evidence together. And it also positions you as someone who makes decisions based on facts, not feelings. And that's exactly how leaders think. So here's exactly how to do it. First, reference specific data points, not vague claims. Don't say things like, in my experience, or I've heard that. Use numbers, research, metrics, customer feedback, performance data, whatever's relevant in your company. And second, show what the data suggests will happen. Make it really concrete. This could increase conversion by 20%, or we'd likely see a 15% increase in churn. And then third, ask for their perspective on the data. Don't tell them what to do, invite them to interpret it with you. And fourth, offer an alternative approach that's backed by the same data or different data. That's your shield. When you argue with data, you're not being difficult, you're being rigorous. And rigorous thinking is exactly what gets you promoted. Here's another quick example. One of my clients, David, he worked in product management. His VP kept proposing features based on what he thought users wanted. David just used to build whatever was requested. But after we worked together, David started saying to his boss, look, I'm curious, what user feedback are we basing this on? I'm seeing survey data that suggests users actually want this instead. What do you think about running a quick test so we can see which gets more engagement? And his VP then started pulling him into roadmap planning meetings because he asks the right questions backed by evidence. That's what this strategy does. It transforms you from someone who executes to someone who evaluates. And those are the sort of people that companies promote. I know what you might be thinking. Look, Mostyn, I'm not senior enough to push back. What if my boss thinks I'm just being difficult? And look, I get that as a concern. But just remember, leaders aren't looking for yes people. They're looking for people who think critically and manage their priorities strategically so that you can make their lives easier. If your boss gets defensive and you respectfully challenge an idea, or you ask for their views on prioritization, that's actually a red flag about them and not you. But in most cases, if you use these strategies, especially leading with data and protecting your time through prioritization, they'll respect you more, not less. I've seen this play out with hundreds of people. The ones who start speaking up and setting boundaries, they don't get fired, they get promoted. Or maybe you're thinking, if I don't stay late and say yes to everything, won't they think I'm not a team player? But actually, it's the opposite, because leaders are selective about where they add value. They don't have unlimited capacity, none of us do, but they do have clear priorities. So when you protect your time and you force that prioritization, you're demonstrating that you understand what leadership actually requires. And here's the real question. What's the cost of not changing? Because if nothing changes, you'll still be in the same spot 5 years from now, working harder than everybody else, staying late, and watching less capable people get promoted. And that's the trap. But these 3 strategies are how you escape it. Now, if you want to position yourself as promotable so you actually get the advancement you deserve, there's one more piece you need to understand. Because these strategies only work if you know how to communicate your value in those moments that really matter. So watch this video next, where I break down exactly what employees who get promoted say in interviews, one-on-ones, and key moments that make them impossible to overlook. I'll see you there.